I'd like to call the Tuesday, August 8th, 2017 Park Board meeting to order. And the first item is the roll call. Janet?
Commissioner Giesecke?
Here.
Commissioner Burke?
Here.
Commissioner Willett?
Here.
Commissioner McCauley?
Here.
Commissioner McCormick?
Here.
Commissioner Good?
Here.
Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner Strother?
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson?
Here.
Commissioner Halbert?
Here.
Okay, thanks, Janet. The next item is the approval of the meeting agenda.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. The next is the approval of the meeting minutes from our July 11th meeting. A
Move
motion?
to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. The next is community comment, and seeing that there isn't anyone in the audience, we can move forward on that. Before we get to our two main agenda items, I wanted to recognize and thank Catherine and Ben for their service this year. This is their last meeting, and you guys were just so great to have on the commission, and I thank you so much for all of your great thoughts and your participation. And so maybe we can give them a round of applause. Okay, so with that, we will now turn to the reports and recommendations section. And we have on there, the first item is to continue to work on our 2018 Parks and Recreation Commission plan. So if you turn to your packet, you can see that we had our work session where we came up and did our ideation on the items that we thought were important. And then at our last meeting, we grouped those in a few different ideas to give people some thoughts of how we might look at those initiatives in a more holistic way. So what I'd like to do is ask for any comments on the groupings that you have here, and then we'll talk about how we're going to go forward to finalize those for September, which is when we'll have to complete our work plan items. So if you remember last time, we felt really that there was a funding or some sort of funding options, marketing communication, something to do with our athletic fields utilization and capacity, and then there was like a stewardship or kind of a park environmental aspect of it. Now, the one thing I'll mention is we do have a number of initiatives that we will have that will continue from this year. So we'll have the comprehensive plan. Potentially, we're going to have Arden Park, Weber Woods, Braemar, and Fred Richards. So there will be a lot of other activities, and just remember those take quite a bit of time. So as we think about the other items that we want to own, just not to forget that we will be spending a lot of effort on these other things.
The one thought I had would be on the carryover. Hopefully in a couple of those we'll have gone from master planning to implementation, hopefully. And I don't know if that's going to then change the amount of time that some of us would have to spend on it or not, but they're still important and need to be on here, but it just might be a different workload.
True.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard for us to know for a couple of months on some of those, right?
I guess I did have one clarifying question. You have the two groupings here, and maybe I'm looking at the wrong piece, but we have member goods, sort of 1 through 4 groupings, and then your suggested 1 through 4 groupings. Are we deciding whether or not we want to pick one or the other, and some or all?
Yeah, so good
Okay.
question, Julie. These were just ideas that we had last, and they were very similar in how we had thought about it. And we could add to that, like if we thought, no, these aren't exactly the right ones, or like you said, you could pick and choose. We could say, you know, we're not going to be able to do 4. I think we should just recommend 3, whatever it might be. And then once we have these broader groupings, we'll have people assigned to own a project plan that they'll bring back in September to present back to the commission that we can react to. Okay?
One question I had was around the, on both lists, stewardship/environmental and then environmental issues. Can we get some more clarification around what that would mean? Are we asking citizens to help keep the parks clean? I mean, what are the specifics within those two categories?
So Eileen, and Greg, you can comment on yours too. When I put it together, I was looking at the ideation list that we had, and there were things around environmental stewardship. There's also like paths and parks, which could be, around how do you utilize the parks better. There was invasive species. So it's more around, and the other thing I think could even be on there is how we look at that Adopt a Park program and how we're helping that. So it can be pretty broad or it could be really narrow depending on how much we want to tackle on that.
And looking at this, I mean, the two that are really distinct from the two groupings I thought were the connecting parks, which is number 3, and member goods, and then in Chair McCormick's number 4, athletic facilities and field utilization. And I like them both. I think having, because we still have the other items from our work plan that we're going to continue, I think we should I like the idea of having 3 or 4. And I do like the idea, as we talked about the field utilization, and really, that's something it seems like we could dig into and get some information. But I really like the connecting parks piece too. So I'm wondering if connecting parks, if you see it folding in anywhere else, or if it is a distinct piece.
Julie, I think we can do whatever we want, and I think it could be in the environmental and stewardship, because it's kind of stewardship of the plant or of the parks and how they interrelate potentially. But again, I think we have to remember we are going to have quite a few potentially other initiatives. So just how broad do we want to make that groups?
And when I think about physically connecting the parks, it could also be strangely part of communications. If what we had decided communications meant also is how we're communicating with planning and other parts of the city as they talk about where they're building sidewalks, where they're building bike paths, which is not really in the Park Commission's wheelhouse, but definitely impacts our work. So I could see at least that piece of it being pulled into marketing and communications, just because of that within the city communications. But.
Yeah, and I think also with wayfinding and all the other things that might help people to get from one park to the next, that makes a lot of sense too.
So any thoughts on the aspect that Greg brought up about metrics? It seems to be kind of an overarching one.
Right, like what I was thinking, I actually didn't get a chance to ask Greg about this, but I think each of the projects should have a metrics around it about what's the success, like how are we going to measure success of the project? So they might be different depending on the project, but each one should define that up front so that we can keep track of it. Do you think so? Okay.
Good idea.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good way to at least get that process started, right?
Okay, so any other thoughts? Because I still feel like we really are gravitating to a few, and we can assign some, not really owners, but people that kind of take the project plan and run with it a little bit over the next month and bring back a recommendation. So the things that I have here, and then if we want to narrow it down, that's perfect, would be funding options, which would include things like could the city do a matching program, or is there anything we can do around sponsorships or fundraising or anything around that. The other was the marketing communications, which could be as broad or narrow as we want to make that. It could include the paths in there, but for sure it would include like how do we communicate to our constituents about our activities, how does our website work, just a whole variety of things. Could be the wayfinding stuff. And then I think the field capacity and utilization, which is one I know that Greg's brought up before, is a really important one and fits well with a lot of the planning work we're doing with the other master plans, would be an important one. And then, of course, there's kind of this environmental stewardship side around how do we manage our parks.
Well, I'd be happy to take the lead on the funding.
Okay, great.
Project plan.
Great. So on this project plan, what I have and we can add to it, but I just put a few thoughts, and it would include, what type of team members do we need? Is it a large project? Is it smaller? Do we need any staff needs so that Susan and her team can plan for that? Other resources, for instance, in communication or in funding, it might be working with the budgeting director, it might be working with the communications team, or if there's dollars that we might need for it, so we can see if we can get that approved. A description and an objective, why it's important for us, why we think it's important. What would the success measures look like, just high level at this point? What would good look like when we're done with this project? And then the timing. So, and then of course we can add whatever else people come up with. Okay? Okay, so Michael will handle the funding options.
I'll take a first shot at the field utilization.
Okay, great. Thanks, Greg.
And I would be happy to take marketing and communications, noting that there are 2 members that I think have been very interested in being involved in that who aren't here today. So I'll make sure I reach out to them to
Perfect.
get them involved.
Perfect. Great.
I would like to aid and assist Mr. Miller with the funding, if I could.
Okay,
Good, it saves me
perfect.
a request.
Good. Now, do we want to put the environmental and stewardship on the parking lot at this point, or do we want to also put a project forward on that? What do you think?
First bias is what we've got, you listed off 4 or 5 other things that we know are going to roll over, and we've just added 3 that could be pretty sizable. As important as I think the environmental stewardship is, it might be difficult for us to say we're going to tackle 8 or 9.
Yeah, I mean, it can remain on the list, kind of unassigned and
That could be a good way to do
unimplemented
it.
until when it's possible.
And if others drop off, we know it's there, that we want to pick it up.
Yep.
Okay, good. So I think there is a place for that. I think it's under that parking lot, and that way we don't lose track of it.
Yep, it's a good
Okay.
idea.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so then the process will be, what we have is funding options. Michael's going to own that, put that project plan. Julie, marketing communications, and Greg, field utilization. And then Dan, you're going to help on the funding options. That's great. And then Julie, you'll reach out to the other members who weren't here today. And then at the next meeting, we'll review what they've put together, and we can tweak it.
And since Julie's going to have help and Mike has help, I'll help Greg with field utilization.
Perfect. Thanks, Eileen. That's great. Okay. Okay, so that's the first item. And then the next item on our agenda is just to finalize this letter. And the idea of what we'll do with this letter, again, is to send it out to those Adopt a Park members to thank them for their work with us and helping maintain the parks. And what we're thinking is Janet will, once we have this finalized, she will organize it for us and then bring it to the next meeting, and whoever's responsible for that park can sign the letter, and she'll get that mailed out. And if we have more than one person on a park, then they'll both sign the letter and work.
Do we have people that are signed up for each of the parks right now that are helping out with this on every park?
Do we have people who have adopted every park?
Right.
I know, I think there's a
or
few
groups?
that don't. Yeah, but there's quite a, yeah, so the majority have people. Mhm.
Can we get a list of that 7?
Yeah, we have that, and we could send it back up.
Okay.
Oh,
Was
here we
that
go.
it? Or is this just us?
It's also on the website right now, too.
It's just us. Is that it, or?
This one here.
Oh, okay, all right.
So any comments on the letter from, I know a couple people sent theirs in, and I've made those revisions on this letter. And then Susan will make sure that we have all the right facts for the Edina Quality of Life survey now that that's come in.
The only one I had was a minor one, and that's the Edina to Go app. Should probably all be capitalized. Edina
Perfect.
to Go.
Perfect.
Could say within quotes, Edina to Go app.
Good, like it. Okay, well, good. So we'll go forward with this letter with one change from Greg, and then we'll get those out. I think it's really a nice timing to get those out in the fall because people have worked through the spring and the summer, and it'll kind of close up their involvement before winter. That's our reports and recommendations. The next section is on correspondence and petitions, and that was attached. I don't know if anyone has any comments on that or questions for Susan on that before we go on. Okay. And then the next item is chair and member comments. So I don't have any additional chair comments, but any member comments?
I was just going to observe that I saw a couple of times folks playing cricket on what would be otherwise a baseball or a softball field, and we've spent some time talking about different ways different types of fields are utilized, and I don't know enough about cricket to know if a softball or a baseball field is an ideal field to use for cricket, but just wanted to point out that I had seen that a couple of times while running through the parks, and I thought it was something we should keep our eye on if folks are sort of voluntarily organizing cricket in our parks.
Yeah, actually, I was dropping one of my son's soccer friends off at his house by Cornelia, and there was some people playing within the hockey boards, I believe. And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." He said, "Oh yeah, they're there every Friday night." So they're and I know a cricket field is much bigger than a hockey rink, but they seem to use that as at least a layout for it. So looked pretty fun, actually.
I just had a couple things. I was able to participate last Saturday morning in the first walkthrough the new Braemar golf course that Joe Abood hosted, and is going to have one, I think it's each of the first Saturdays for the next 2 months, and they just took us through about 6 of the holes. It was a lot of fun to see the course starting to take shape, and really somewhat surprising how much progress they've made in some area, right? I think the back part of the course, they said they're laying some topsoil this week and hope to be seeding within a couple weeks. So making good progress, and if anyone else has an interest, I'd recommend that you try to make one of the next 2. It's kind of fun to see it. So that was one. Second, looking at the city council updates, just to comment on this, I noticed there was a approval for some work on a number of the park tennis courts. And I thought that might be another thing, and maybe, Susan, we already do this, but I thought that might be another thing to make sure we communicate out to the Adopt a Park contacts, right? So that they know this has been approved and you can look forward to it happening. I'm sure they'd appreciate that. And as I said, you may already be doing it, but it'd be a good thing to do. That's all I've got.
Good, thank you. Anything else? Oh.
Yeah, and that sparks something that I was thinking about. Actually, a friend of mine, and this is communication related, but I know a friend of mine in his software group developed a software system that I believe he said they had Edina using that would communicate out road work or road projects coming up. Now, again, I don't know if Edina is using it now or if they were just helping on the pilot project, but it was something that the citizens could look on the website and see, here's work coming up, here's projects coming up, here's what it's going to look like, here's the roads affected. And you think you could take that same type of concept and say, we've got improvements here, we've got work here on the parks also. If we were using it, or if we wanted to build something like that into the communications, we could. I think it'd be a lot better to advertise improvements than kind of keep them quiet like is happening now. Good things are happening, we're just not, I think, Edina just isn't tooting their own horns in that respect. So Susan, I don't know if you know anything about what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't know specifically what, I don't know if it's the engineering or our public works department is using, but I know Ann and I just had the conversation last week about just what you pointed out, that we're redoing the basketball courts, tennis courts in these different neighborhoods, and we need to be communicating. We need to, well in advance and let them know that these projects are happening. So I think maybe with this initiative, the marketing and communications, and then some internal conversations, we can put a better plan in place.
Mm-hmm.
I do have one comment, and it's more of a question, Susan, and maybe I'm stealing your thunder, but there's a blurb in here about where we're at with the Arden Park discussion, both publicly and with the city council and whatnot. Can you fill us in? Do you have a little background in where that's at right now?
Well, Ann did tell me I wasn't allowed to answer any questions tonight in her absence, but yeah, so she's probably watching though. Where we are with Arden is the presentation was given at the last council meeting, and the city council decided that they wanted to add another public hearing to get a little bit more feedback from the residents who are supportive of the project and the residents that have some concerns. So they delayed approving the plan that was presented until the September 19th meeting. So the public hearing will be on September 6th, and then it'll go back to council for a decision on September 19th.
Is there a solidification of kind of a feeling or discussion that is the council leaning towards approval, but they're waiting to get kind of a little more reaction, or do you have a feeling for that?
Yeah, Dan, I guess I'm not completely sure. I think there is a lot of support for the project because it's I think a lot of enhancements that will be made, especially to the creek. I think council just wants to be sure that everyone is having a voice.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, well, with that then, I'll turn it over to Susan.
So I just have a couple. The first is, I can't believe it, but the Aquatic Center is going to be closing for the season on August 20th. It feels like we just opened. That's how quickly summer has passed. So if you still have a few days, a couple weeks to get out and enjoy the pool. Greg already mentioned the golf course walking tours, but the dates are September 9th and October 7th. And hopefully each of those months there's going to be some additional progress that you'll be able to see on the course. But they had a great turnout. I think there were 25 to 30 people. A lot of, I think, excitement around the renovations. So good things happening there. The website. So you've all probably gone in and had a look, but the new website was launched on August 3rd, and everything is going pretty well. There were maybe some minor issues, but everything was taken care of really quickly. We've had a lot of positive comments and feedback. So, and any feedback that you all have, we'd love to hear that.
Susan, where would that feedback go?
That's a good question. I think you could send it directly to me or to Ann, and we could always pass that along to our communications team.
Yeah, everything's being directed to Jennifer.
Okay. Yeah, the communications director. But we'd be happy to pass any information along.
Okay.
Feedback. And then just the last quick update I had is on our park signage project. So I've been working with Geograph Industries on the continuing plan. So as you all know, we had some additional funds left after the bids came in, and Ann and I have had some conversations. We've talked to Scott Neal a little bit to find out where our priorities are. So we're in that process right now, working with them on some additional wayfinding signage, really looking at Braemar Park is one area, some additional signage at Roslyn too. So I think at the September meeting I should have a little bit better idea of some of those additional signs. And that's all I have.
Okay, great. Thanks, Susan. Yeah, that was a very good project, and you guys managed that bid process extremely well. So it's exciting to see that we're going to have some extra dollars to be able to improve some of the wayfinding. So with that, we can take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
All right.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.